Okay, guys, so I want to go over MX versus ATV Legends in 2025, do a review. There's been many different updates, countless updates. I mean, Rainbow Studios usually does a patch for the game at least once a month, sometimes more. So many different updates to add or change things in it since it's been out for almost 3 years. I have over 300 hours in the game on PC and close to 100 on PlayStation on console. So over 300 hours on PC, close to 400 hours in total. And I just want to see where it's at in 2025. Now, we will go over some DLC with the game because there are different versions that you can buy. Sometimes you can get a special edition that has the game, and then, for example, the 2024 Monster Energy Supercross replica tracks already included with the purchase. So there will be some DLC, but let's just go over the game, try to stick to mostly the base game, and see where it's at in 2025. First up, I want to show you what vehicles you can expect to see in the game. We have quads, we have 125 and 250cc 2-strokes, we have 250 and 450 4-strokes. Now, we have a 500cc, 110, and a 50. Those 3 bikes are part of a DLC, the Element Bike Pack. You can have them in the game, but they're not in the base game. Then we also have UTVs. Now, that was all DLC OEMs. I want to show you can get the exact same versions as just the base vehicles in the game, the THQ or Rainbow Studios version, minus that Element Bike Pack with the 500, 110, and 50. Moving on to customization, I want to use the bike as the example because typically Rainbow Studios shows a bit more love to the bike than any other vehicle in the game. With any vehicle you choose, the customization will be pretty much the same. You have these categories you can choose from with different brands and options you can equip to whatever vehicle you're using. Now, Rainbow Studios has improved immensely in this area. They've added more brands, they've added more options, they've improved the UI, they've even added a new category. We didn't have handguards in the beginning, but mid to late 2024, they gave them to us. There's not a ton of options there yet, but they're finally in the game. Now, with most categories, usually they give you a customizable version to where you can change the color and make it the way you want. So even if you don't have a ton of options, you usually always have a customizable version to make it the way to fit whatever you prefer to see on whatever vehicle you might be trying to do it on, right? So the place that they usually give us the most new stuff as far as customization would be in the graphics kits department. There's team kits, there's throwback kits, there's stock kits, new kits. I mean, most of the time when we get customization for the bike, there's usually always 1, 2, 3, 4, or even more graphics kits that have been added to the game. Now, I do want to talk about the tuning just a little bit. So it hasn't changed a lot since the beginning, as far as how you do it, but the actual tuning and how each individual adjustment might change the bike or vehicle, whatever you're trying to adjust on, that the adjustments have changed a little bit and how they affect the vehicle. But this is how you change how your vehicle performs. You don't do it with the customization in the aftermarket parts. You do it through the tuning here. On to the rider customization. The rider customization has improved a ton. If you can remember, or maybe you don't, but if you can remember, in the beginning, when the game first came out, we barely had any customization to choose from. We had only a handful of helmets, a handful of jerseys and pants, a handful of boots and gloves and goggles. There wasn't much for rider customization whatsoever. The players were worried and were questioning Rainbow Studios and asking them if this was all we were going to get. And they said, no, we're going to be adding more in the future. And they have held up to what they said they will do. With every update, usually there is some form of rider customization that gets added into the game. Now, some of the gear you will see is team-inspired gear, so Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki, Honda HRC. That gear is exclusive to buying that corresponding OEM bike pack. So Honda bike pack, you get the Honda gear. Kawasaki bike pack, you get the Monster Energy gear, and so on and so forth. But they have added a ton of just gear into the game. But I did want to talk about it because you might see people using it and you might want to know how to get it. It is a bonus for buying an individual bike pack. But again, they have added tons of free gear into the game since it came out because there wasn't a lot in the beginning. They've also started doing these coordinated gear drops where, for example, they did one with Fox and they're going to do one with Alpine Stars where you see the new gear in real life and then within a day or two or a week or whatever, it's in MX versus ATV Legends. So that is really cool and something that hasn't been done before. Getting the new gear almost immediately in the game. Really cool, really awesome. And the customization has been improved so much. The only complaint I have is that there is enough. I wish we could get a change to the UI where we could have tabs with each brand and then be able to choose it that way instead of just going through one giant page. But overall, customization, much better. As far as modes in MX vs. ATV Legends, there's a ton of them. You have time trial, you have quick play, you have online multiplayer, you have split screen, and many more. But one that's new and was recently added in 2024 would be series mode. Now you can do this with many different tracks and stuff in the game, the stock tracks in the game as well, but where it really shines in my opinion would be with the, for example, 2024 Monster Energy Supercross DLC. You get 16 tracks. You're missing Daytona. I know it's its own thing, so you don't have that track, but you can basically run and kind of have a career with those 2024 Monster Energy Supercross tracks or the 2024 Pro Motocross tracks. You can run a career simulation, if you will. But then moving on to the actual career in the game, yes, you have MX, ATV, and UTV. I'm going to use MX as an example. It has a story and it has a good idea, but one thing I've seen players talk about, especially if they're new to the game, haven't played in a very long time, or whatever, is a career is kind of in a place where it turns players away from the game. It gives you a 125. I get what they were trying to do. It puts you on a stock 125, but it has you race these motocross tracks that are huge with huge jumps, and some players, they just can't get over it. So they're just casing everything and it isn't fun. And I know they want you to upgrade the bike and eventually move up to the 450. I get what they were trying to do, but this is some people's first impressions of the game. So in my opinion, I feel like they should make some 125 tracks for that stock 125. You want your first impression to the player to be good and to keep playing your game. And for some people, it wasn't that way. So that's just an opinion. Curious to see how you guys feel. But overall, modes, very good. Tons to choose from. And they have improved it since the launch. This part of the review is going to be pretty big. This would be the tracks section. I'm going to split it up into Supercross and Motocross and then further split that up into stock and some DLC. So first up, we have stock Supercross tracks. You have many different options. This track, for example, is a little bit more fantasy, not necessarily fantasy, but arcade. The jumps are pretty big. The rhythms are really big. The lines you can go for are huge. So it's not the most realistic, but it is fun. I feel like every Supercross track stock in the game offers some form of fun, whether it's because it's fantasy, it's just really flowy, it's a bit more realistic. Whatever the case may be, the stock Supercross tracks are fun. And then, for example, you have Anaheim here. This is the basic Anaheim stock Supercross track, and it's a bit more realistic. The jumps aren't as big, the rhythms aren't as big, just more realism to it. But fairly recently, Rainbow Studios did go back and give us expert versions of some of these base stock Supercross tracks. I'm going to use Anaheim as an example. You saw the first Anaheim we showed you. Well, this is the same one, but the jumps are a bit more peaked. They're a bit bigger. They're steeper. The whoops are a little bit bigger. So the expert version, this is a completely free addition to the game, was great for the game. It made the tracks a little bit more challenging, and you could just, it feels like you could do things that you couldn't do on some of the base versions of those tracks. And then obviously we did get the 2024 Monster Energy Supercross DLC added to the game, where we got 16 Supercross tracks. We didn't get Daytona. Again, Daytona is kind of its own thing, but we got all the other replica Supercross tracks from the 2024 season. Again, it is DLC, but one of the better DLCs you can buy. And again, the reason I mention this in this review is because there are versions of the game you can get, special editions, where, for example, the 2024 Monster Energy Supercross tracks are already included. And Rainbow Studios did a great job. They did a great job. They went back and did changes and adjustments to make them more realistic. Fantastic job on those DLC tracks. And then for just another example, we got some throwback tracks. If you're a big Reflex fan, MX vs. ATV Reflex fan, we got some Reflex throwback tracks. We have Fort Dodge 2, we have Boxcar, we have Pine Top, we have, not Southwick, Sandwick. We have Sandwick. Tons of DLC tracks, all of them very well done. Tracks as far as Supercross go, both DLC and base, awesome. Very awesome. Now moving on to the motocross side of the game, I feel the exact same way as I do about the Supercross side. The tracks are amazing. The stock tracks, the base tracks in the game, the DLC tracks, they are phenomenal. There is probably only one, maybe two of the stock motocross tracks that I didn't really care for. They weren't bad, they just weren't as fun. But most of them more similar to this one. Kind of realistic, kind of fantasy, where you have huge elevation change, really big jumps. The setting is amazing. And this track is in a biome, Kodiak Valley, that is a free ride world. So the whole world is kind of like this, where it's snowy. It is snowy on the top. It's kind of not snowy in the bottom. You have to scale the mountain to get up there. Very, very cool atmosphere, very cool biome, and an even cooler motocross track that they were able to create with Overlook here. Now, they also do have the Pro Motocross replica tracks. Similar to the 2024 Monster Energy Pro Supercross tracks, we have 2022, 2023, and 2024. Every year they tried to do something a bit different. I mean, obviously they would get the replica tracks to be the way they were in real life, but they tried to add something, whether it was an invitational race or trails or whatever in the free ride open world map of each track. They tried to do something a bit different. Again, it is DLC. I don't know if they did the same thing they did with the Supercross tracks where you can buy a special edition, but the tracks were so good and so well done, I wanted to throw them in the review if you did decide to pick them up. And then you obviously do have Sleigh Ground as a DLC. In my opinion, maybe the best DLC in the game. You have the motocross track, you have another track, you have the free ride stuff, you have these huge jumps, just random huge jumps spaced out across the map that you can hit. Very well done, very cool. Again, it is DLC, and you might say, well, I don't know if I want to buy any DLC. Well, you don't have to, but after the game has been out for almost 3 years, and it is kind of a games as a service, I mean, they keep updating it. The game would get stale if we didn't have some add-ons to the game, or the patches that change physics or add customization or whatever it might be. Overall, the tracks are amazing and fantastic, both Supercross, Motocross, base stock tracks in the game, and DLC versions of themselves. Tracks, A+. Time of day has always kind of been in MX vs. ATV Legends. We had like morning or evening and then afternoon, but they have recently started adding nighttime, rain, and snow. All that is pretty new. Not every track or map gets it. Most every new DLC map will get these versions, the nighttime, the snow, and the rain. And they have went back, for example, Rawlings Farm didn't always have nighttime or rain or snow, but they have recently went back and given Rawlings Farm the treatment where you do get the nighttime, rain, and snow. And it's very well done. The snow and rain are kind of dynamic, where it's lightly raining or snowing, and then eventually turns into a full-blown thunderstorm or blizzard. Very cool, very awesome. Time of day stuff, extremely well done, and a great addition to the game that wasn't there in the beginning. So how are the bots in MX vs. ATV Legends? Are they good? Are they bad? Well, they're kind of medium. In my opinion, they're not great, but the reason I say medium is because on some tracks, they're pretty okay. You know, they usually stay on the track. They can race you kind of hard and can be a little bit of a challenge, but most of the time, and maybe it's because I play the game quite a bit, so they might be more difficult or easier, so easier or harder depending on how good you are at the game. In my opinion, they're not the best. They have tried to improve them, and they are better or worse on different tracks depending what you're at. For example, this track at the Dog Pound for the Lawrence Brothers compound, they're okay, but I mean, within one lap, I had a big enough of a lead without trying too hard that the race is over. So the bots could be better. They are, one thing I will mention, and it is kind of that way with multiplayer, the collisions can be a bit weird. They're kind of sticky. You hit each other and you kind of stick together. You can't you're not solid. You can't punt each other off the track as easy as you can in some of the other games, but that doesn't really have anything to do with whether the AI are good or bad. They're just kind of medium, in my opinion, sometimes leaning a little bit more towards worse, but again, they're usually trying to improve them, and they have been since the game first came out. Terrain deformation is most certainly in the game. I do want to go over it because people usually ask about it. You have none, light, medium, strong, max, so you, the player, decides what kind of terrain deformation you're going to have. For these examples, this was just one lap on maximum terrain deformation. One lap, and we were able to carve a pretty serious rut into the track. And not every track is the same. Some tracks will get rougher or deteriorate differently. But yes, there is terrain deformation and has been adjusted since the beginning, and where it's at is a pretty darn good place in my opinion. Camera angles are important in a motocross game because not everybody wants to play the same way. I prefer to play in third person, but some people prefer to play in first person, and the first person camera in this game is amazing. They did a great job with it. It is very customizable. You can move it up, you can move it down, you can pull it back, you can push it forward, and probably find an angle that suits you if you do prefer to play these games in first person. They have other camera angles to choose from as well. You have slot cam, you have a customizable version for third person as well. So the camera angles all together are very, very well done, but specifically the first person is amazing. It is fantastic, and in my opinion, the best way to even play this game. Yes, I know I said I prefer third person, but the best way to play it, the most immersive way to play it, is with the first person camera because the game looks gorgeous this way. And I don't believe I covered this in my first review, so I want to go over it here. Camera angles, specifically first person, absolutely amazing. Last up, we have the physics. Where are the physics for MX vs. ATV Legends since the game has been out for nearly 3 years? Well, they are much better than where they were at the beginning. In the beginning, I did say that I felt like the whip rotations could be improved, sped up a little bit, and the bike ground physics were too slippery. There were other problems. For example, the bike could land a bit weird and you would get some weird bounces or whatever. I mean, all that stuff for the most part has been worked out. The bike feels much more stable, much more predictable. Sometimes, if you come up short, you would get, again, those weird bounces, or you would get into a rut and it would kick you weird. And yes, it's a video game, so you're still going to have some of it, but overall, the physics are much improved. The ground physics can still be a little bit slippery, but the problem is, for me, I've played for 300, 400 total, 300 hours on PC. I don't really, I notice it, but it's just the way I play the game now. It's just the way I play the game, but they're not near as slippery as they were in the beginning. You can control some of it with your bike setup. So for me, I have mine a little bit more slippery than probably some people would play with it, but it's just the way I prefer to have it. But they still are a little bit slippery, but not near as bad as they were in the beginning. The whip physics feel very, very good. They recently did an update to improve the whoop physics. So before, the whoops were like my kryptonite. I was so bad at them, and now you can actually kind of blitz whoops. If you couldn't before, now you probably can. It is much easier to go through the whoops. Again, the whips feel good. They have changed the quick whips. Before, if you push the sticks together or pull them apart, you could do like a quick whip, and you still can, but it's different. They've completely changed that. Yes, the physics are full free. So if you want to throw a whip, you can throw the stick sideways and whip. You can pull oppos. You can do tons of different stuff with the free physics in the game, and they have been improved immensely since the game first came out. No, they're not perfect. Yes, there still are some bugs that can happen. I've had issues where once in a while I'll come into a turn and the bike will just like lift up off the ground, especially at the Flying Motor Ranch here on this motocross track. And maybe it's just this track because I rarely ever have that happen to me anywhere else. But yeah, the physics are much better. The automatic transmission has been improved quite a bit since the game first came out. So overall, physics free, improved a lot, and they're not done. We don't know where they'll be when the game is fully finished. I would say the only complaint, not that I have because I'm fine with it the way it is now, but the only or biggest complaint somebody might have, you also do have preload, okay? You have preload and a seat bounce with the seat bounce left stick, preload right stick. But the only complaint I could see, or the biggest complaint, would be that the ground physics can still be a little bit slippery. But I can still rail ruts. I can get into ruts and not push out over them. Sometimes you do, but you can do that with any game. So, in my opinion, the physics are in a pretty good spot right now. Always could be improved, but much better than where they were at release. And there you have it, my review for MX vs. ATV Legends in 2025 after 300 hours on PC. Were you always a fan of the game and just feel like it got better? Were you a fan of the way the game was and don't like where it's going? Were you not a fan of the game and now you've tried it or came back to it and it's way better? I'm really curious how you guys feel about it. In my opinion, since I liked the game from the very beginning, it has only gotten better. Yes, they have done things in the past where it felt like I didn't like it, but the more I played, it was the right decision. And I know as far as the physics go, they don't change the physics to annoy the player. If you enjoy them that way, they're doing it for the health of the game. I know one reason they may do physics changes is because they change the terrain deformation. Maybe the ground physics just won't work with the changes they made to the terrain deformation. So they're doing it for the longevity of the game and with the players in mind. They're definitely trying to make the game to where a majority of players enjoy it. And I personally think they have done a fantastic job. Rainbow Studios, I don't know if you hear it enough, but thank you for the hard work you do, all the free updates you do. Yes, I know there's a lot of DLC too, but all the free updates and the continual support of MX vs. ATV Legends going on their 3rd year of release. So let me know in the comments how you guys feel, but you guys and girls are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for the support on the channel lately. It really does mean a lot. And until the next video, take it easy.